The question I get asked by far the most is, David, how do you get this overlay that you use in all of your videos? I basically have people jumping out of bushes every day throwing this question at me, so I thought, let's make a quick video answering that. Now, the software that I use is called MSI Afterburner, and it's available for free, but I'm also going to show you how to set it up, because I get a lot of questions about that as well. I'm also going to give you a couple of alternatives so that you probably, depending on the gaming system you have, don't even need to download any software for, but first I want to show you what I use every day. Now, first off, when you download it, be sure to get it from MSI's website. There was a bit of a drama around it, I think it was a year ago, where there were fake versions of MSI Afterburner with like viruses and stuff. So the website looks like this, and there's even a stay away from fake Afterburner sites logo in the bottom, so be sure to get it off MSI's website. And I always download the final version, which is 4.6.5, not the beta. And then the install process is fairly straightforward. I don't think there's anything that you need to worry about, aside from Norton. Don't let it install that. When in doubt, don't let the thing install the free antivirus trial. That's just a general good rule of thumb for life. So yes, next, accept. We also want to install River Tuner Statistics Server, because as far as I understand, that's the actual overlay software. So that bit's really important. And then install. And then once it's installed, this is what MSI Afterburner looks like. This is a really useful piece of software. You can use it to undervolt your graphics card and control the fan speeds on it and stuff. But today we're interested in the overlay. So you're gonna click on the little settings wheel and then go over to monitoring. Now here you can see there's a whole bunch of settings that you can apply for your overlay. But there are some specific things that I always want to monitor. Now, the first thing that you need to do is if you have an iGPU, you need to identify whether GPU 1 or GPU 2 is your dedicated graphics card. So you do that by clicking on this little arrow down here, and then you can see that 1 is RX 7700 XT. So that's the GPU that I want to monitor. So I know that when I go into monitoring, GPU 1 is what I'm looking for. Now what I usually set is temperature, and I usually just set temperature 1. You have options, especially on AMD graphics cards, for like hotspots and stuff, and you can monitor that if you want to, but I don't want the overlay to be too cluttered, so I'm quite picky about what I put in it. So I have just like the general temperature setting, and then I have GPU usage. Now, GPU memory usage is very important because that's how you tell if you don't have enough video memory on your graphics card and if that's why the games are stuttering or whatever. And then I also have core clock up and memory clock as well. That one's not entirely necessary, but it's still interesting to see. And then finally, GPU power, just so that you can see kind of what the graphics card's doing. It's not super accurate, but it's an approximation of how much it's drawing. And then after that, I go down to CPU. Now, you have the option to track each individual core's temperatures, but that's overkill and it's going to lead to some very cluttered monitoring. So I always just use the general CPU temperature one so that you just get, like, I think it's an average of the cores, and then CPU usage. Also, I don't want each core's individual usage. It's useful sometimes, but it makes things very cluttered. And then CPU clock. CPU power is also useful. RAM usage is very useful. And then you get down to the frame rate and frame time. Now for this, you have to check the box because it's not enabled out of the box. And then for frame rate, you again just say show in on-screen display. But when you get to frame time, you click show on on-screen display and then you switch it over to graph. That's a much more useful representation of that information. And then you get a very good look at what stutters and kind of input latency you're getting while gaming over the last minute or whatever. So that is a super useful bit of information to have up. Now, when you're finished with this, you have to apply so that, the software knows that you want to do this. And then I head over to on-screen display. And the first thing that I do here is enable toggle on-screen display, which I usually bind to the equal button because you don't use that while gaming. And that means you can use this hotkey to turn the overlay on and off so that you don't have to have it there all the time, but you can check out what's happening with the system every now and then if you want to. Now, after you do that, go to more. And here it brings up the kind of general settings of what the overlay looks like on your PC. Now, the main thing that I adjust here for my videos is the on-screen display zoom, because with the default setting, it's really tiny and it's gonna kind of be annoying for people watching the video to see. So when it comes to 1080p videos, I drag it over here, which makes it nice and big and easily visible for you. But this is up to personal preference, and if you're just gaming with your system and you're not making videos about it, then that's going to be really annoying. So play around with that setting to see what kind of works for you. And honestly, that's pretty much it with MSI Afterburner in terms of settings. So let's launch a game so that you can see what it looks like after I've applied all those settings. There you go, that's what it looks like in my videos. So this is very useful to me. I think that you can have more detail, but this is good enough for you to generally know what the system's doing. And then you have a button that you can toggle it with. So yeah, that's the baseline of what you need to know in terms of my overlays. But if there is stuff that you want to monitor that you don't by default get in MSI Afterburner, there is a way around that. And for that, you need to download another piece of software, which is called Hardware Info 64. And again, make sure that you download it from Hardware Info's website so you don't get any weird herpes with the software. And yeah, you can choose whatever server. Now the installation for this one's pretty straightforward. Again, you just go through the steps. And then when you launch it, I usually go with sensors only so that you can see what all the sensors are that you have available in your system. And as you can see, there's just an absurd amount of detail here. And there's a way for you to bring pretty much any of these bits of information into your MSI Afterburner overlay. It doesn't do it super gracefully, but I'll show you in a bit. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to go into Configure Sensors, and then you have to click on Main Settings, and then there is a Shared Memory Support, and it's got a 12-hour limit. So that is a big limitation of this, is that you may have to do this every 12 hours, so it's not really a set and forget thing, but it is useful if you're trying to diagnose stuff on the system. So you say okay, and then you can minimize hardware info. And once you've done that, you bring up MSI Afterburner, go back to the monitoring settings, and then there's this active hardware monitoring graph. You click on that, and you enable hardware info DLL. You click on that, press setup, and initially you'll only get a couple of options that it kind of brings to the table, but you can add, and then here is every setting that's available on hardware info. Let's say we want to monitor the frequency that our RAM is running at. We're gonna say okay. It pops up over here, you say okay. You say okay again. And then you scroll all the way down and you'll get to the hardware info settings. So this is all the way at the bottom of this list. And there you go, there's memory clock. You can say show in on-screen display. And then if you want it kind of in a different spot, you can drag it up and put it wherever you want it to show up in the overlay. There is a bit of a problem with it though. It shows up like that in the game. It doesn't really give you any information other than the unit that it is. So that's pretty annoying because A, you have to remember what this thing is monitoring, and B, it looks terrible. It doesn't integrate into it nicely. So bear that in mind. That's why I was again saying that this is the kind of thing that you use to diagnose issues on the system more than just for like daily monitoring or whatever. Oh, just on a side note, in terms of benchmarks, I go over to benchmark and then I bind begin recording and end recording to these two buttons so that I can use the MSI Afterburner suite to actually benchmark and give me information about the performance of the system. So this just captures frame rate. Now, one thing to bear in mind with this overlay, and it's a pretty big shortcoming, is that it doesn't work in all games. Games like Counter-Strike, for example, its anti-cheat software blocks overlays. Although, with Counter-Strike, there is a workaround, which I'll quickly show you. So in Steam, with Counter-Strike 2, you click on the little manage wheel, you go to properties, and then under launch options, you need to add in a command. Now, this command does mean that you can't play online against actual people. You have to play against bots to actually benchmark the system, and then you remove the overlay for like competitive play or whatever. But it's an option. It's useful to have. So the command is dash? Is that what that character is called? I think it's called dash. So if you type that command in, which I'll have in the description below so that you can just copy paste it if you want to, but if you type that command in, then you can use your overlays in Counter-Strike. But like I mentioned before, you can't use it while playing against other people online because it kind of bypasses the anti-cheat software. So now that we've had a look at MSI Afterburner, there is another option, which depending on what graphics card you have, you can use the overlay in the driver suite of your graphics card. Now I've currently got an AMD graphics card in the system, so we'll start with AMD. And to get to your overlay in your driver software, you go to AMD Software Adrenaline Edition. Now once you get into your Adrenaline software, you head over to Performance, and then you click on, well, it's at Metrics by default, I think. And this is where you can set up your overlay. Now, you start off by just enabling metric overlay here. Now, you don't have to come into the software to enable it. You can use Control-Shift-O, which is the hotkey for bringing up the overlay. So that's useful so that you don't have to have it there the whole time you're gaming. But you do need to be in here to modify it. Now, currently, the metric profile is intermediate. So if you want to be real basic about it, you can just kind of select one of these presets, but I find that none of them have a combination of sensors that I want to track. So what I usually do is I start with intermediate, and then here you can kind of enable and disable what you want. So starting off with FPS, here we've got frame rate, which you can either show just as a number or you can enable a graph for it. But like I mentioned before, we want a frame time graph, not a frame rate graph. Okay, so here I'm going to enable frame time graph so that we kind of have a plot of what that looks like over time for stutters and stuff. You can also enable things like 99% FPS if you want to, but I find that clutters it up too much. However, the reason I don't look at that is because I see that information when benchmarking, so it's up to you if you want that. It is potentially useful to kind of have a look at what stutters are happening. Now here again, it's monitoring both the iGPU and our dedicated graphics card, which is kind of useless for gaming. So I'm going to turn that off because as you can see, it kind of limits the stuff that we're looking at. But under GPU, we can see GPU utilization, GPU core, temperature, and you can also, fan speed is pretty useful so that you know how noisy your graphics card's being. We want GPU memory, memory utilization. Honestly, clock speed for memory isn't that useful unless you're overclocking, so that's kind of up to you. But for this, I'm gonna turn it off. And then we've got all of GPU2 off, and under CPU, we can turn on utilization, frequency. I find CPU frequency more useful because it fluctuates more than like memory frequency on a graphics card. And then temperature, power, and then finally system memory I want on as well. So this is an overlay that I'm happy with. And when it comes to sampling interval, it's how quickly it updates. Now it defaults to 1 second, but that's a little bit slow. I'd kind of leave it at 1.5 because then it just gives you a more dynamic look at it. This is very much up to you though, again. And other than that, you can also change the size of it here, so that's something that you can play around with. So this is all stuff that you can play around with to kind of set it to how you like visually. So the final thing I want to do is switch over to a system with an Nvidia graphics card in it so that you can see the GeForce Experience overlay option. Now, once you've launched the software, you click on this little irradiated triangle, which brings up this overlay. And then once you're in here, you click on performance, and then this is the bit of performance monitoring software. Now, again, like with AMD's software, you have this kind of basic overlay setting where you can just get FPS, just get latency, or you can get up to a very advanced one. And then I ran into an issue where the overlay refused to launch when I used the hotkey Alt-R. Yeah, my keyboard's working, Alt-R. It literally says Alt-R up there. I'm confused. There's some issue with the hotkeys here, which AMD didn't have. So that's quite a big condemnation of the Nvidia drivers. But anyway. And then I realized that your only customization are the 4 presets. You can't edit what sensors each of the presets shows you. Is that it? Is that all the information that you have? honestly, Nvidia's is pretty butt cheeks. I would strongly recommend, if you have an Nvidia graphics card, that you should use MSI Afterburner, which brings me to the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. I know this is very different to the normal kind of video that I do, but like I said, people ask me about this all the time, so I thought that, yeah, it's useful, clearly, to people if I make a video like this. Our next video is gonna be of us going to South Korea to go buy a gaming PC to kind of see what the tech markets and stuff are like over there. So subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Thank you for watching, and until the next video, bye-bye.